You have a television in your pocket, a climate-controlled box to sleep in, enough calories to feed a small village, more pairs of shoes than a king had 500 years ago by any objective measure. You are richer than 99% of humans who have ever lived, and yet you feel broke. 1. Emergency away from disaster. Checking your bank account with a pit in your stomach, lying awake wondering how you'll pay for the car repair, the medical bill, the school expense, and here's the paradox that hollows out your chest. The richer America gets, the poorer Americans feel. Not because we lack money, but because we've raised the bar for what enough means, so that a family in 1950 with one car, a black and white TV, and a rented house was middle class, and today that same family would be considered destitute, which means we haven't become poorer, we've become more demanding, and that demandingness is a psychological weapon we turned on ourselves. Inflation-adjusted income has doubled since the 1970s. Homes are bigger, cars safer, food more abundant, but financial anxiety has tripled, and even millionaires worry, with nearly half of people worth over $1 million calling themselves financially insecure, not because they might starve, but because they might fall, because the American nightmare isn't poverty, it's the status drop. And your brain's reward system doesn't care about absolute wealth, it cares about relative wealth, proven in a study where monkeys happily ate cucumbers until they saw another monkey getting grapes, then threw the cucumbers at the researcher, and you are that monkey. You have cucumbers, but your neighbor has grapes, your co-worker a Tesla, your cousin just bought a second vacation home, and your brain, trained by a culture that worships comparison, tells you cucumbers are garbage. The American twist is that we've democratized comparison. In the 1950s, you measured yourself against your block. Today you measure yourself against billionaires on Instagram, influencers on TikTok, and former classmates whose highlight reels make your whole life look like a blooper reel. You're not competing with the Joneses anymore, you're competing with the Kardashians, and you will lose. But here's the reversal that only fully lands the second time you sit with it. The wealthiest Americans aren't the ones with the most money, they're the ones who learn to want what they already have, which sounds like a cliché but is a neurological hack called gratitude adaptation. Your brain can only compare to what you let it compare to. So if you stop scrolling, stop peeking over the fence, stop measuring your plate against your neighbors, your brain recalibrates and the cucumbers become delicious again. But American culture doesn't teach that. It teaches that wanting more is a virtue, that ambition is freedom, that dissatisfaction is the engine of progress, and those things are true until they eat you alive. Let me tell you about Stephen, a corporate lawyer in Chicago making $300,000 a year, driving a Porsche, 4-bedroom house, Costa Rica vacations, who sat in a therapist's office and said, "I feel like I'm drowning." The therapist asked, "What would it take for you to feel financially secure?" Stephen thought and said, "5 million. If I had 5 million, I'd relax." The therapist asked, "What about the person making 50,000? Do they feel secure?" Stephen laughed. "Of course not. They're poor." And the therapist said, "But you make 300,000 and you don't feel secure, so maybe security isn't about the number." Stephen was annoyed, but he went home and listed everything he had that the average human on Earth does not: clean water, electricity, a refrigerator, a mattress, antibiotics, a toilet that flushes, and by the end of the list he was crying, not from sadness, but because he realized he'd been living in a palace while complaining about the paint color. He didn't stop wanting things. He stopped believing that wanting things meant he was lacking, and he learned a difference between I want and I need. And that single distinction between desire and desperation turned his life from a panic attack into a choice. The American cognitive paradox is right here. We are the richest people in history, and also the most anxious about money, because we turned enough into a moving target we can never hit, and the only Americans who escape the wealth paradox are those who opt out of the comparison game. They don't stop earning, they stop comparing, they look at their actual, real, imperfect life and say, this is enough, not because they've given up, but because they've woken up. Right now, your brain might want to argue, insist that your situation is different, that you really are struggling, and maybe you are, but ask yourself, Compared to whom? Compared to 1 billion people without clean water? Compared to 1 billion people without clean water? Compared to your ancestors who buried half their children? Or compared to a filtered, curated, fictional version of success designed to make you feel small? The question from the beginning, why do Americans have more money than ever yet feel poorer than ever, has an answer that the first viewing can only half unpack. Enough is not a number, enough is a decision. And you have the power to make that decision right now, without a single extra dollar in your account. Now go look at what you already have. That's an order.